Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, true or false, you are invincible?
Man, it's starting to feel more like it as they keep trying to kill me.
You are back from Vegas after witnessing
hmm
LSU USC. You're not at 100% right now. You're not at your absolute best. Which, look, everybody that comes back from Vegas, I think, realizes they need at least a week. When you're over 30, you need a week to be able to recover from Vegas, and that's without watching LSU blow another opener.
Yes, correct. So, some housekeeping here. I do have COVID. I contracted COVID during this trip. So if I say something extra stupid, just let me know. I am wearing
No,
an
it means
almost
you're good. It means you're immune. Like you're fine.
yes,
You can't hold that against Will. So keep that in mind.
exactly. I could say whatever. I could say LSU Natty and just pretend I don't remember it.
Sure.
Here's the vibe I'm on. It is a Wednesday, and I'm wearing an Almost Friday shirt with Mike Jordan playing golf on it. Couple of things about. So the trip was awesome. I basically got sick like day two, and I got to ride like some dune buggies with my buddy John. It's like between both of our birthdays. I'm actually about to turn 30. On the 20th. So I should actually be good by then, which is a blessing, honestly. So we do these dune buggies day one. I'm like, cool. And then I start feeling bad. And I was just joking with Connor off air. It's like the most 30-year-old trip of all time. Cause I literally just go, you know what? Nothing I do is going to be as cool as those dune buggies. I'm just going to kind of hang out. Like I knew I was like pretty seriously sick. I didn't know what it was. So I stayed in, didn't hit like the casinos, didn't like do anything crazy, any drinking or anything. Cause I knew it was going to be a nightmare if I like, I'm I ain't as good as I once was, right?
But you're as good once as you ever were.
And that was the dune buggies, right? I was like, you know what? I'm good. And so, I got to watch all the games on Saturday. But yeah, I was there with John, and then Peyton flew in a little bit later in the week. And we ended up hanging out, having some time with the boys. We've all been working really hard, playing some Xbox. Bringing my Xbox was the best idea ever. We actually rented an Airbnb, which was also great. So it really just ended up being kind of like a staycation with the boys. Got to, we went out and watched some college football and stuff. And like I said, I just now tested positive. So I was feeling kind of icky. But the height of the feeling bad was definitely during that game, which is hilarious. I got to watch, I've been to three straight openers, guys. I've watched Brian Kelly blow all of those games. And I'm so serious, guys. I'm so serious. Walking out of this one was the best one because I've been saying on this podcast 4 months, hey, losses don't really matter that much anymore. So I'm just sitting here. I'm like, oh my God, not a conference loss against a Big Ten team in week one. Brother, you already survived the first one of these. I survived a car crash. Okay. Yeah. COVID in a non-conference. Okay. Then what?
Will, you are invincible. That's yes, that is correct. If you
Mm-hmm.
can handle that, and if that's your perspective, and look, I'm not telling LSU fans that was a moral loss. It was nothing like a moral loss. That is a game in which if you were like Brian Kelly afterwards, pounding the podium, I do not blame you whatsoever.
That
That
was
was
hilarious, by the way.
that was just straight Denny Green.
It was
He
so
totally stole that. The Bears are who we thought they were.
Yep.
We let him off the hook. The fact that LSU lost that game, it took me a while to process it, and we've talked ad nauseum about
Mhm.
LSU and openers and all these different things. But that was a game in which you went into the fourth quarter thinking LSU's about to take this over and win by 2 touchdowns. That's how I felt. I thought they were starting to get the ground game going. John Emery looked great. Unfortunately, as we saw from Wilson Alexander before this recording, John
Mhm.
Emery out for the year with a torn ACL, which is a bummer for the former five
Goodness. I
star.
mean, he looked amazing, man. That was literally going to be my silver lining. I was texting you after the game. It was like, well, at least we found our running back.
Yeah, I mean that to me was like besides the fact that I think Garrett Nussmeier continues to look the part. I'll
Mhm.
agree to disagree with what Brian Kelly said afterwards about being outplayed. Like Miller, like he definitely outplayed him. It's like, yeah, well, Miller Moss made more plays down the stretch. I understand there's a couple plays that Nussmeier wanted back, but to me, if I'm an LSU fan, the thing that is keeping me up at night and most frustrated, that is maybe a bigger picture issue than even the defense, this heralded offensive line. Will, how many rushing yards do you think LSU had in the fourth quarter of that football game?
Not a ton, man. Yeah, they finished with just over 100.
They had 3 on 6 carries in the fourth quarter of a game with an offensive line that we keep talking about how good Emory Jones, Will Campbell are, and those guys are great. And
Will
having
Campbell had two
four,
false starts as a tackle.
I, there were some false starts happening across college football that we're still doing that thing. We haven't quite gotten over it yet with like it feels like it's happening a bit too soon. I know it
Yeah,
happens more in the NFL, but I feel like I saw a lot of that on Saturday. Saw it again on Sunday, but
he
it's
was a
like,
little
man,
too ready for the fist fight. I think the fist fight hadn't started, and he was already trying to punch people.
yeah, not to just put that on Will Campbell or anything like that, but like the interior of that LSU offensive line, you're like, man, when exactly is this going to be a group that can run the football? Because if LSU can run the football, they win that game. Will, the point that you brought up that we were texting about is really overlooked of how little time LSU took off the clock when
Mhm.
they're either about to tie it or take the lead. Brian Kelly messed that up, and he deserves blame for not necessarily being able to run the football in those spots or have. I think they called two passing plays consecutively out of the 2 minute break. We're not allowed to call it a 2 minute warning. We're going to call
Mhm.
it a 2 minute warning, and LSU wasted zero time. And when they did that, I was kind of like, well, there's a lot of time for USC to be able to go down the field and win this football game. And then, sure enough, that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, being a Louisiana sports fan has made me kind of like a suffering savant. So, like, I saw this in terms of my other suffering as it was happening, right? Which is like, they get down there at second 8 at the 14, right? So, like, it's right at that 2 minute, right? There's 2 minutes left. They have two opportunities to keep the clock running. They are down 3 points. So, your worst case scenario at that point, right, should be you kick a field goal with under a minute left,
Under a minute. Yep.
or you at least make them burn a timeout or so, right? Um, Instead, here's the funny thing that makes this makes it even funnier. So, I say in terms of the suffering, I thought about this in terms of the Nola no call, right? Because this is a point I always bring up about that play, which is that New Orleans, that no call was egregious. Okay, like they got robbed. Everybody should feel the way they feel about that. It was ridiculous. Expecting the NFL to do the right thing is never going to happen. The Saints, in a almost identical situation, where the 2 minute warning at the goal line, they had a run call. Drew Brees audibled out of it through a slant route that hit Michael Thomas was covered, so he threw it at the ground. That play, the no call, should have never happened because the Saints should have kept the clock running and not allowed for enough time for that field goal that ended up winning or tying the game, sending to overtime, right? Same exact deal here. This is what's actually so funny that people are getting the easy joke with Brian Kelly. Here's the real joke people should be telling. He should have been more of a boomer. Actually,
Mm.
Brian Kelly was too innovative. Okay, he ran an RPO. Why did he run an RPO? Emory Jones on, I guess what was, sorry, not Emory Jones, John Emery. I haven't said his name in so long. God, he bald, man. That's so sad. John Emery on, like he could have waltzed into the end zone if they simply had handed that RPO off. And instead, the ball hits the ground. Now, granted, the receiver was open, right? Ball still hit the turf. Cool thing about having COVID is I was not drunk at all for this game. I was locked in. I could tell you exactly how we lost this game, buddy. So, point being, Brian Kelly was being too new school. He was being too and again, we could blame the new OC. We could blame Joe Sloan. I get that. I will give Brian Kelly at least a little bit of credit for taking the blame because I've never seen him do that in his career. So whatever, yeah, he blamed us. But the thing that's so interesting is from a game planning standpoint, that all I needed was a boomer coach who everyone talks about how, he smells like Ben Gay and he dances on recruits. All I needed was that guy to run a halfback dive, get a fullback in there or something, just hand it off up the middle, bleed the clock down. And if you're going to go to OT, go to OT. This game didn't go to OT. That's the thing. So at the end of the day, like, they had a shot to score a touchdown because John Emery was cooking. I know he's injured, but if you go back and look at that play, he slides through unopposed. Yeah, he doesn't have the ball, but there was no one there to stop him. He was big as hell. He was getting ahead of steam, So point being, I think that Brian Kelly actually outthought himself here, which is a whole new way to lose a football game. Most of the time he just puts his head down and says, well, if these players would play harder, we might have a chance to win. He was legitimately furious because he knew what he did wrong, which is that every coach this man had always had, going back to 1950 or whatever, was telling him, you got to run the ball there, son. And he was like, I think I'll call it RPO.
Yeah, and I get it. Like we brought up the numbers before, 6 rushing attempts for 3 yards in the fourth quarter. There clearly wasn't a lot of faith in that aspect for LSU, but at some point you have to be willing to say, we need to go and get some yardage here. We need to be able to burn some clock and kind of manage this game and understand all the different dynamics that are going into it. I thought if you came into this one believing that LSU was a 10-2 team going to a playoff, you probably came away from it going, I'm not there. I don't really feel particularly good about that, despite the fact that I thought Nuss looked mostly good. It
Nuss
was a
looked awesome.
continuation of the bowl game
Yeah.
where like he needs in a weird way he needs to start getting back to some of the gunslinger stuff. I thought, because not targeting Kyron Lacey and not well, I shouldn't say not targeting Kyron Lacey in the second half. I don't know if he had a target in the second half, but it certainly
Didn't
didn't
have a
feel like it.
catch.
He didn't have a catch. I know that.
That's what
After
matters.
7 for 94, he looked unstoppable in the first half of that game.
Yep.
I actually came away feeling like, okay, they're still going to be able to do some things in the passing game. That part was good. And I came away from it thinking the Blake Baker defense was mostly putting them in better spots. It was at least not as much of a liability. And of course, you're remembered by how you played down the stretch, and they didn't get the stop that they needed to. And Miller Moss makes a really nice throw there and reads, what's that?
Miller Moss.
Why are we saying it like that?
Remember the Coach O voice of Miller Moss? Come on, I have COVID. Remember I was talking about Coach O saying Miller Moss's name made me laugh.
Yeah, that I didn't get the Coach O vibes because of COVID. It's again COVID excuse. We're gonna excuse that. But yeah, like I came away from it thinking LSU should be better defensively. They kind of look like they have some guys that are stepping up on the defensive line. I liked what Ashton Stamps was doing in the secondary. Kind of a couple tough moments for him down the stretch, but for the most part, I think LSU is still a solid team. But man, these opening game blunders, that's all you can call it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's dumbfounding. I think LSU is cursed in season openers, and forget FCS schools. Start scheduling Division II schools to make sure you get wins.
Yeah, I believe they're opening at Clemson next year. So that's
boy.
going to be a really unstoppable, like, what is it? A movable object versus a stoppable force. Like Dabo or Brian Kelly have to win that game. And like when a player from the transfer portal steps on, they have to like do a ritual or something. But yeah, no, I'm with you there. I mean, so that's why I was actually pretty excited about this stuff, because number one, the losses don't matter as much. I picked LSU to lose this game. Now I picked them to lose it in a shootout. Okay. I feel amazing about LSU's defense compared to what I thought I was going to see, right?
Yeah.
So I expected LSU to lose inexplicably. So we got that. That's fine. What I didn't expect, and you asked me, like, okay, what would make you feel better about this team? Young defensive backs stepping up, old defensive backs figuring it out. We didn't see a ton of the latter. We saw a good amount of the former. Ashton Stamps is going to be that guy. Right? I'm excited about that. Allen played well. He's banged up. So that's the thing. Like, I was specifically locked in on the DBs. The D-line did fine. You know what I'm saying? They weren't getting gashed the way they could have been, considering that's all we heard all offseason. Now, it did bite them in some big moments. I get that. But, at the end of the day, this was the worst defense in America last year, and one of the worst we've ever seen in our lives after just seeing the whole 2020 season. So, yeah, I think that this defense has turned it around, because here's what I didn't see. Guys not knowing the play.
Yeah,
guys not knowing their assignment.
Yeah.
That's what I saw last year. So when you go from the defense being bad and no one knowing how to run the plays to guys communicating before plays, guys being in positions to make plays, this great offense only scoring 27 points and needing a miracle at the end, and Brian Kelly pooping the bed. So, yeah, I mean, every prediction had this in the 30s at least.
I did. I definitely did. I thought it was 38-35 was going to be the final score. Both these defenses, I mean, Danson Lynn, like, know the name now, USC defensive coordinator with chaos scenario number 5, whatever that was. What if Lincoln Riley actually has a defense? That was pretty good. That was pretty good, all things considered. You didn't get this experience because you were at the game, but for those of us who watched it at home, the second you saw Bob Diaco run his hands through his hair, great head of hair, by the way, Bob Diaco has, it was over. If that's who Brian Kelly is consulting on the sideline, some issues. Some big-time issues. Not a great sign. I embrace the civil conflict. I do. I am a civil conflict enthusiast. For those who really want to go down the college football rabbit hole, if you know, you know. But that was LSU was cooked the second that happened. So all in all, like, I don't think it was as troubling as it could have been, but still, for LSU not to get over the hump in these openers, man, it is baffling at this point.
Yeah, but everything's ahead of them. And like I said, if this fan base was going to be disappointed if they thought this was going to be a championship year. I said that from the beginning.
Yep.
And I literally, not to be like, oh, but like, I remember talking to like you and Marley about it, me being like, they're going to lose this game because there's just not enough time. And I think we saw that. I mean, remember, you're replacing your OC with a co-OC situation. You're rebuilding your whole defense. The way that LSU could have gotten embarrassed in this game and how they actually got embarrassed, yeah, it's disappointing because they got closer than they probably should have, to be honest. But they're going to get better from here. That's the thing. Everything other than John Emery's ACL, which goodness, everything else is very clearly fixable. The backs need to figure their crap out, and the O-line needs to just stop getting pushed around. But they have the talent, you know?
Definitely do. 4 3-year starters on that offensive line, with the exception
Mm-hmm.
of center. Would think they get that figured out. Okay, plan for today. Neil Blackmon, he's going to join us in a bit, talk through everything going on with Florida. And yes, there are a lot of things already going on, of course. So we dig into that whole situation. We're going to close with Lad of the Week. But first, Will, week 2, it is already here. We have 7 games to be able to go through, and then lock of the week as well. Let's start with the game that College Game Day is going to be at. Let's start with number 3 Texas, 7.5-point favorite against number 10 Michigan. The over/under I have for this one is 1.5 Michigan quarterbacks played. Alex Orji didn't start for Michigan, which was weird. Very, very weird. Davis Warren ends up starting for Michigan. Came as a bit of a surprise for those of us who expected Sharon Moore to just kind of be operating this run-heavy offense. And Michigan instead found itself in a 6-point game with 6 minutes left against Fresno State. Not great for the defending champs. Not full-on 2020 LSU, but sorry, that was rude. That, you know what? I take that. Could we? I need to bleep that out.
You don't let me talk about Florida. How come I got to talk about LSU? We should have switched us too. Anyway.
Well, I'm sorry. Kick a man while he's down. You got COVID. You just got back from Vegas. That was uncalled for. I'm calling myself out. That was unnecessary. Didn't mean to go there. But this is a very unsettled quarterback situation, it looks like, in Ann Arbor. I don't think Michigan was just trying to keep it close to the vest to throw Texas off the scent. Mm-hmm. So once again, stop me if you've heard this before, but Texas is traveling in week 2 to face a top 10 team that's still trying to see what they have at quarterback. Crazy.
Right.
Last time worked out.
First off, I would think that if your name is Orgy, a committee approach is probably not a great move. Anyway,
well, that was RG3 for the top rope.
The other side of it is that, part of us wants to be like, well, this is all just gamesmanship. This is all just game. But Alabama sure as heck did start Tyler Buckner against USF last year, and it kind of handcuffed Milroe too. So
that was after the Texas game, though. After the Texas.
No, I know. I'm just saying that they were really truly not sure who their quarterback was. It was not some weird gamesmanship thing. So maybe that's a thing that does still happen, because we have seen it now too as 2 big programs.
This is a family-friendly show, man. That's good. This is a dream scenario for this Texas defense. I really think it is. They're going to do everything in their power to confuse Michigan when it has to throw the football. A Michigan offense that averaged 4.5 yards per pass attempt. What's going to be interesting for me is if these Texas receivers, the depth that Sark has been talking about in the offseason, if we see that surface, because just mark it down. Will Johnson, number 1 player in college football, 25. That guy's going to lock down somebody on the outside. Probably going to be Isaiah Bond more times than not. Maybe it's Golden sometimes. Sark likes to be able to work those guys in at least a handful of snaps in the slot. So they'll move them around a little bit. It won't be somebody exclusively on the outside, but I would bet on Will Johnson winning that matchup. These young Texas receivers, Jonte Cook, Ryan Wingo, can they step up? Because you have to. These are the types of moments where you need those role players, those secondary options to be extremely good. And that's how you win tough games on the road. I don't think that you're going to want to run the ball against Mason Graham on that Michigan defensive line. All the questions we have about who Michigan is in this new era, I don't really question how good their defensive line is. I think it's tremendous. I think you'd rather trust Quinn Ewers in a big-time spot to be able to make the right decisions, which he has shown he is capable of doing in these big-time games. I thought it was interesting that Ewers threw the ball 27 times in the opener. That was a lot for a guy that got an early shower in the third quarter, middle of the third quarter, and they still threw the ball 27 times. Maybe it kind of speaks to the fact that they don't want to run the football a ton in spots that they don't have to because of that running back depth. It's, trying not to get those guys hurt and have an extra tread on, take some of the tread off of those tires. But maybe it's because they realized they needed to get these young receivers on the same page as Quinn Ewers. You're trying to be able to do that in a setting like that against Colorado State. I think Texas gets a lead in the second half of this one and forces Michigan into some obvious passing situations that it's not ready for yet. And so I'm going to go with a little bit of a repeat of last year of what Texas did at Bama. I'm going to say that Texas wins this game by double digits, wins by 10, 27-17. Texas holds on to that top 3 ranking.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super big on Texas here. Of course, we went to the sports book, and one of my I actually did really good on Saturday. Not so much on Sunday. I was really predicting that blowout or the shootout I was talking about. But the one of the few I actually did get wrong was the Michigan over. And I thought that Sean Moore was going to come out and really try to send a message that it wasn't all Jim Harbaugh.
What was the over for that game? If you
It was
remember?
high, man. That I don't remember, but it was like it was one of those. Okay, it wasn't super duper high to the point where I was like, oh, they can make it super high and make it one of these like 70-0 games if he wants to do that. I guess he wanted to and could not. But yeah, that's the thing is like, I think the eyes of the world were on them with that kind of documentary thing that has come out about stallions and all that. So they had every reason to come out and prove everyone wrong, and they couldn't do it. Against an inferior team, it might be the coaching thing, it might be whatever, but it's hard to tell. And against Texas, modern Texas, at least this year's Texas is not where you want to figure that out. I got to be careful because every other year pretty much, but last year was a great time to figure stuff out against Texas. But yeah, I actually think that Texas is a much more like just a unit that is more together. They have that continuity with their head coach, their quarterback, all that. So yeah, this was a game that I think we had circled in the early season, and already I'm starting to be worried about Michigan being exactly what the inner hater in me, the inner SEC homer, being like, well, that was just cheating. There was nothing special about that Michigan team. This looks like the Michigan team that I thought Michigan was last year without Connor Stalions.
To me, I think we're going to talk about a lot probably this year about playoff elimination games.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be part of this conversation?
FSU, you are eliminated.
FSU and Boston College, that was a playoff elimination
game. It was a playoff elimination game, guys. I hate to break it to you.
Boston College, you're still alive. I think this is a national championship contending elimination game because it's not so much that the loser of this game cannot win a national championship. To me, I think it will send a message that if you can't win this type of game, you're probably not going to be able to compete at that level. Okay, so you still might see both of these teams in the college football playoff. But I'm saying that if you're Texas and you can't take advantage of this type of inexperience, yes, in a hostile atmosphere on the road, but you're a touchdown favorite for a reason. It's because you're the better football team. You're the more proven football team. You're established. To me, if we see Texas's weaknesses and if Michigan wins this football game as a touchdown underdog at home with all of this turnover, that's going to say, Texas, you are not ready to compete at that level when it comes time for the college football playoff because Texas has the experience. They should be the team that's going out there and showing us what their identity is in this early going. It's not to say that they can't get better, but to me, this is really indicative of who Texas should be during this season because you know that Michigan can take things away. And what do you do in those moments? What do you do? Like, are your receivers dropping passes left and right? Do you have a running back room where it's just like, there's one guy who's kind of out there, but he can't really pass protect, and yours is getting kind of beat up by that defensive line. Like, this will be a game in which you can see Texas's weaknesses if they are there, and if they are weaknesses that can prevent you from winning a title. Michigan wins this football game, we're having a much different conversation about their trajectory and about their title defense season, what it's going to look like competing in the Big Ten. I will be unbelievably impressed if Sherrone Moore wins against a Texas team that, quite frankly, is better. If they're playing on a neutral site, Texas is a double-digit favorite. They are. They absolutely are. And I do think that Michigan is going to have some of these moments where maybe it's smash mouth football, testing that Texas defensive line early in the post-Sweat Murphy era. But give me the Longhorns, man. Give me the Longhorns to make kind of a statement in week 2.
Yeah, I think too, really quick on that, like, this is kind of a nightmare coaching matchup, which is that Sarkisian, has always been a pretty brash guy. And that's how we won at Alabama last year. And that was whenever we did that preview, I was talking about, whoever kind of, has the most gumption, I'll say it that way, whoever, shows that the most. And Quinn Ewers went in there and that offense went in there and pushed Alabama around. And that's what they had to do to win on the road. And it was really wild to see that, and it made us think that it showed Alabama's flaws and it showed how long the road was ahead. And they ended up getting there. And it was even more impressive for it. But point being, this is a nightmare coach to have to come to your house after all the stuff that's swirling around, after not really looking, great last week, because the game, remember, that Moore was given credit for was that Penn State game where they handed the ball off 30 plus times. You're not going to do that against Texas. In fact, if you try that against Texas, you're going to lose expeditiously. You might as well not show up. Meanwhile, on the other side, we have Quinn Ewers, who has gone through like three different extreme makeovers. He's got like his credit score. He's like figuring out everything. And so like point being, both of these guys know exactly who and what they are and what their goal is. And it feels like Michigan is a little bit scattered. And like Michigan is, it's weird because Michigan's the defending national champion, but it's like Texas has that kind of like swagger right now. They have like, they will be more confident going into Ann Arbor, which is a crazy, crazy thing to see, because that's the thing about a guy like Harbaugh. He's such a cult of personality figure. I hate to keep talking about my team, but that's kind of how Coach O was, right? Where he took all the shine off of the players because people were asking questions about him. They were like, oh, what do you do? And when you have a guy like that, he is the picture of confidence because he lives outside of society's norms. You watch Jim Harbaugh over there just chugging a gallon of milk, and you're like, this guy knows something everybody else doesn't. And so you can kind of believe in that guy because you're like, it seems like he's got something going on up there. Morris just kind of feels like a regular nice dude. Seems honestly too well adjusted to be a crazy football coach.
I wanted to see this game last year, and I'm kind of bummed that we didn't. I still think Michigan, looking back on it with how Michigan rose to the challenge in the Rose Bowl, and obviously the way that they asserted their dominance in the national championship against Washington, I still found myself wanting to see what it would have looked like of Ewers as an underdog. And he's not an underdog in this game, according to the odds makers or anything like that. But every time it's felt like, oh man, so much pressure on Quinn Ewers in this spot, he's kind of been able to rise to the occasion. Now, Oklahoma fans are saying, hey, what about the Red River rivalry, a game in which he didn't come out on the winning end last year, he did the year before. But for the most part, man, when it's spotlight time, that's when I think Ewers is particularly good. I mean, last year in the Big 12 championship was a good example of that, albeit against an Oklahoma State defense that struggled a lot. So I do think Texas wins this game on the road, and they make their first statement as an SEC team, not necessarily an SEC play. All right, well, speaking of Oklahoma State, 7.5 point favorite. Speaking of 7.5 point spreads, number 16 Cowboys hosting Arkansas. The over-under I have for this one, 4.5 yards per carry for Ollie Gordon second. That's what he had in the opener. Slow start for Oklahoma State in that one. Predictably slow start, I think. They're always just kind of prone to that for whatever reason. But it was an 11-point game midway through the third quarter against a South Dakota State team, which, look, I don't know, drink if you've heard this before, but don't schedule good FCS teams in your season opener. It's not a particularly fun experience, trust me. The efficiency is everything when it comes to defending Ollie Gordon II. It's much easier said than done, but you're not going to take him out of a game like Texas was able to do in that Big 12 championship. I don't think that's necessarily a realistic expectation for Arkansas because the volume is just, is going to be there. That's just the way that they build their offense. But I think in 3 of 4 losses that Oklahoma State suffered last year, Gordon did not hit 4.5 yards per carry. And the only time that they lost and he exceeded that was the Iowa State game, which was the first game where he was given the opportunity to be the feature back. And it was still very new because Gundy decided for whatever reason, you know what, let's have Alan Bowman throw the ball 48 times while Oklahoma State runs the ball 24 times. Didn't exactly follow that plan moving forward, and they were obviously better for it. That won't be happening on Saturday against Arkansas. Gordon just got fed the rock 28 times against an FCS team. And while it wasn't the 50 that Gundy promised us for Gordon's DUI punishment, it was still 28 carries against an FCS team. They are going to run him. If they run him 30 to 35 times against Arkansas, it will not surprise me. You do not arm tackle him, and he will lean on you. This offensive line will lean on you. That is what they do well. If you're going to try and contain him, not stop him, but contain him, you load the box, you play gap discipline football, you do all those cliche things that defensive-minded coaches talk about, and you say, you know what, we're going to make this 15th-year quarterback, Alan Bowman, try and beat us. That's the formula, if there ever is one. Plenty of teams have said it. Very few have been able to execute it. The good news, Arkansas currently leading the nation in yards per carry allowed. That's good. The bad news, holding Arkansas Pine Bluff to 7 yards on 23 carries, probably, and by probably I mean definitely, a different task than containing the best running back in college football. Just a little bit, tiny bit different. Huge game, not just for Sam Pittman, but really for the emerging Travis Williams, who is a name to kind of keep in mind in coaching circles. I ultimately think in this one, it's going to be too much Ollie Gordon. I think Taylon Green has some moments in this one. He's going to be able to make some plays against that Oklahoma State secondary, which is their biggest weakness, but I don't think the Hogs hang for 4 quarters. So I'm going to take Oklahoma State to win big, 45-24.
Man, I was gonna say, how did it take you that long to get to our boy Taylor Green? Man, he was balling week one.
He looked great. And I love the idea of Taylor Green being worth the price of admission when KJ was not last year. And I'm the biggest KJ fan I think that there is outside of his genetic DNA, maybe outside of Gus for saying that he has similar physical traits to Cam Newton. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Taylor Green was so fun in that opener. And if you just tell me that's what he's going to do against inferior competition, watch Arkansas play and love yourself some Taylor Green. I don't know how inferior this competition will be, though.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated, by this. That was like one of the things I had talked to one of my boys in Vegas about. Just like, is there anything that you're like, bullish on from like a gambling perspective or whatever? Since you know the SEC, I was like, honestly, man, Arkansas's offense, and I know again it's an inferior opponent, but dude, Arkansas is going to be talent wise an inferior opponent to most of the teams on their schedule. Honestly, kind of including Oklahoma State, and so
Whoa, 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 whoa! Their schedule in SEC play is good, really, really good. Like difficult. I don't know that there's going to be a ton of those matchups where.
No, that's what I'm saying. I said Arkansas is going to be the less talented team.
Oh,
okay,
all of
their matchups, including Oklahoma State. Like Oklahoma State has a better roster than Arkansas.
I got you.
So my thing there is that, like, look, watching him physically play, and I know it's like a little bit different watching Boise, and like I got to see the guy in a jersey to like see what I think about him, which is the most boomer thing. But like, man, the way that guy moves, like the way that you felt seeing Yamaliava the first time, he's 6'6", man. And like watching glides. Like that's why I don't like comparing players sometimes to other players, because when have we seen this exact thing? I've seen some 6'6" guys. I've seen some Finley. I ain't seen some 6'6" guys that can move like that outside of a basketball court, which is why I always, I want to keep bringing up the conversation you had with him. I went, oh my gosh, this is a basketball athlete. This is very rare. We've seen basketball athletes play tight end, play quarterback, or play wide receiver, not really quarterback. And the fluidity he moves with, the amount of confidence and poise he has, I'm very, very interested by him. I think Arkansas is going to at least cover the spread. I think it's probably going to be a 3-point win for Oklahoma State, but I could see Arkansas pulling this one off just based on that, right? Because the quarterback matchup right now, weird as it sounds, I would kind of rather have Taylor Green because I know he can do at least one thing right.
Oh, yeah.
2, run and be tall. So, like, QB sneaks all day.
Yeah, look, I don't know that he's running away from defenses the way that he did in that game where he took a deep drop back and was on the right side of the field against Arkansas Pine Bluff, scattered to the right sideline and decided I need to cut this all the way left, and was able to turn the corner and get into the end zone. Zero, and I'm including Vandy, 0 teams in the SEC, maybe even at the Core 4 level, are probably letting him do that. And if they do, I will mention it because it was ridiculous what he did in that sequence when he, like you said, like gliding. Okay. So I'm not trying to minimize that because it was noteworthy. It was awesome. But I'm curious what it's going to look like if he runs into a team that is able to contain that mobility on the outside. And if he's got to put that trust in these receivers, which he's got some big body dudes. And that could be the game plan moving forward for a lot of teams, not just against Oklahoma State, is look, you're going to have to be able to trust these guys on the outside. Trust them to go up and make a play for you. They've kind of built the roster that way. And against this Oklahoma State secondary that just got punched in the mouth last year, they were not good. That was their biggest weakness. I am curious if that's going to be the game plan for a certain Robert Patrick Petrino, who needs to be wearing sunglasses every game, day or night, as he was wearing in the opener. That was a positive development with him on the sideline. But I'm worried about what this is going to look like for the Arkansas defense against a guy that you're going to look up and be like, oh my God, Alec Gordon's got 120 yards. I didn't really think he did that much, but he just quietly just kind of eats and eats and eats at you.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the other part of it too. And then one thing too, to your point about Bobby Petrino, that is a man on a mission. He is either going to flame out again, but that's the crazy thing about him. He's already flamed out so many times, it kind of doesn't matter. He's now fully sending it. And that's what's so beautiful about the relationship. Like I said, he's a man on a mission. He's looking for revenge. I think that the way that Green is, and he's so chill, actually is like the best quarterback fit for him maybe ever, because he's not going to take any of that stuff personally. And I am truly fascinated by how this offense is going to play, because again, I don't even know really. Usually Arkansas has a couple of receivers, like their tight end's pretty good this year. Haas is their tight end, right?
Luke Haas. They mispronounced it on the broadcast, friend of the program. Luke Haas. Everybody, just pretend that the Z doesn't exist. Just Haas.
Yeah, so like he's good towards LSU, right? But like point being, like they don't have a ton of targets to your point. But I'm just fascinated by how Bobby Petrino's. It's like he knows he wants to get here of I want to score 50 points a game, and he knows he has these pieces, and I'm so fascinated to see how he's going to get there.
Counterpoint. The late Ryan Mallett and Bobby Petrino kind of infamously hated each other.
Yeah, they did.
And they made sweet magic together. So I don't know that you need the best of times all the time. I don't know if Bobby Petrino has a whole lot of best friends in his life. It's kind of just who does he hate the most and work down. So if he and Taylor Green are boys, then that's all the better. But who knows? Maybe they'll have some good moments in this one. Cal and Auburn. Auburn's a 13-point favorite. How about that? Auburn, nearly a 2-touchdown favorite at home. The over-under I have is 9 Peyton Thorne pass completions. That sounds low because it is, and it's what he had in this game last year. Yeah. Hugh Freeze's least favorite game of the year wasn't even getting kicked in the teeth by New Mexico State at home. It was traveling all the way to Berkeley to win a football game. If you gave him truth serum, he would say that. I know he would say that.
Virginia Tech also knows that feeling now too, so at least he has an ally that they also just got.
Very true, very true.
Yeah,
but he was on the winning end of that game, as was Peyton Thorne, who last year had 4 games with 9 completions or less, which is stunning for a starting quarterback in the year of our Lord, 2023. It was. The other 3 games that happened, they were losses. They weren't particularly good. This game was won in Berkeley because of the play of Eugene Asante. It was an All-American type performance from him. The Cal offense pretty much lost its identity once Jaden Ott went down in the second half of this game. Speaking of Jaden Ott, a guy that we knew was back this season, and we didn't forget that in the middle of the offseason when we were randomly talking about like better running backs and like some of the best running backs in college football. He is banged up for this one, dealing with an ankle injury that he suffered in the opener, but he is expected to be able to play. He's Cal's only hope. He is. But I think it's really telling that Auburn's a 2-touchdown favorite in this one. Cal couldn't block UC Davis. All right. Well, Jaden Ott, great player. 14 carries. Did not have a run longer than 7 yards against an FCS team. You can tell me you're keeping it basic. It's very vanilla packages, whatever. I don't think that's particularly good. I think that this Auburn experience in the middle of the defense is going to be a key factor in being able to shut down this Cal offense. I also really like the possibility of Thorne looking a lot different than he did in this game last year. And I don't necessarily think that it ends up being a game in which the new Auburn receivers, I should say, have a combined 6 touchdown catches like they did in the opener. That would be insane if they repeated that type of performance, but you'll hear a lot from them. And it's going to be very evident. If you didn't necessarily want to believe that this was going to be a different Auburn passing game because it happened against FCS competition, totally get it. Watch him in this game and watch him against a defensive mind in Justin Wilcox, who is respected in this sport. I think that Auburn wins this game going away. I think this is a blowout. I think it's 35-7 Tigers roll.
Yeah, I think that so with Thorne, I feel like we've all been waiting for this kind of like breakout party game. I don't personally think it's happened yet. And it's kind of crazy that it hasn't, just because of how good of an offensive mind Hugh Freeze is. Beating up on Alabama A&M is just not going to do it for me. But I think that Cal could be that exact thing. Talking about being a Jordan Hare, like that home field always matters. I exactly see with your point. That game is going to happen eventually. I think it just has to for recruiting, basically. Because it's fine to say we trusted a guy, he broke out, and then even if he struggles later on, go to a different guy, figure something out. But you have to show the proof of concept of what made you stick with this guy for as long as you did. It's better to have a good game and then bench a guy 2 games later, a la Costello than, oh, well, we're just going to keep trying, because that means you never figured it out and you were wrong. And you don't want to sell that to recruits. And so I think at this point, they're going to have to do everything they can to really just, hang it on Cal, New Mexico State. And then if you start to struggle, talking about maybe around the Oklahoma game or the Georgia game, then you got that bye week, and you can maybe even look at it. And I'm not even saying that's a possibility. I'm not saying like let's bench Peyton Thorne. I'm just saying that in the progress of like how SEC quarterbacks go, we are in purgatory here on like Garantano levels almost, where it's like what's going on, like who is this guy, what is he good at? So I think we're gonna see it in these next couple of games, and that's going to set the ceiling. And then that's what we're going to always be going back to. Remember the X game, like this game here, the Cal game. So yeah, I think Auburn is going to come out and probably cover that, look really confident, as they did in week one, and hopefully probably beat New Mexico and then the following week. And then they're going to be like, we're going to be singing Hugh Freeze's praises going into the Razorbacks game, Arkansas game, September 21st.
South Carolina is a 10-point underdog at Kentucky. Kentucky 10-point favorite in this one. The over-under I have, Will, is 2 holy crap moments from Dylan Stewart. As disappointing as South Carolina looked on the offensive side of the ball in the season opener, Dylan Stewart was equally jaw-dropping, I think, rushing off the edge for the Gamecocks. If you haven't seen these clips, what he did against Old Dominion, you need to go on social media and watch it, because watching this, it almost doesn't do it justice when you're watching it in real time to see the bend and see just how freakish the 18-year-old already looks, the former 5-star recruit. He did this thing, Will, and I don't know if you saw this. Our friend of the program, Mike Renner, tweeted out this like 20-second clip, and this is the first thing. But I was watching this as it was happening, and my eyes were like, did I witness this? Because it was so weird. So Dylan Stewart had this rush against Old Dominion where he's coming off of, I guess, the left side. So like right at the quarterback's face. And he is at the quarterback so quickly with this bend that he and the quarterback both don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. They're like staring at each other for a split second. I've never seen that before. And it was like, what just happened? Did we both just black out and now we're just here? Did we travel through time and now we're just here in this moment? And it's stunning to see. Like it's weird to see how unaware the quarterback was, and almost how unaware Dylan Stewart was that move was so effective to get to the quarterback. Mm-hmm. But it was wild. Didn't end up being a sack, but ended up being I think he gets credit for a pressure, whatever it was. He ends up forcing the fumble late in that game, pretty much by just pushing the Old Dominion quarterback because he tried to step up and run for it. And he didn't see him again somehow. Take PFF grades for what they are. Stewart had the highest single game grade for any Power 5 edge rusher since 2020. Insane. Absolutely insane. Again, go watch this clip of this guy. As an 18-year-old, what he did in his debut, very, very special. Things that if we saw this against Air, we would be like, whoa. That guy is awesome. So the question is, first SEC game, does that translate? Do we see this against Kentucky's offensive line and against Brock Vandagriff? Pretty important game for former Tennessee and Florida transfer Gerald Mincey, who I would guess they're going to try and put Stewart on him a bunch and not as much on Cox. I would think that that's going to be more so the game plan. But it's also a pretty important game for Brock Vandagriff. SEC debut, of course. Are we going to see him sped up with that decision-making process, or is that mobility that we've been talking about really for the last 4 years, dating back to when he was a 5-star recruit? Are we going to see that pay dividends in a game like this? I don't know. I don't necessarily think that it's a blistering offensive day for Kentucky where they just light it up, but I do think that the biggest mismatch of this game is going to be Kentucky's defense against Lenore Sellers. I mean, how could it not be? On the road, first career start for your boy. The Rec Specs man himself was not looking particularly confident in that opener. Those South Carolina receivers weren't looking good. As I mentioned on the pod Sunday, I thought that was the most concerning SEC unit of the opening weekend. Maybe it's a little bit of extra prep for Stoops, knowing that the South Carolina game is week 2. And I'm not saying he didn't spend all of his time on Southern Miss, but clearly they were at a significant advantage in that one. Maybe that hatred that Mark Stoops very clearly has for South Carolina, maybe you see that kind of play out. Beamer did the sunglasses the last time that he was in Lexington. don't know that he'll be doing that again. I think it's pretty interesting to see that line at double digits, though. Kentucky's a 10-point favorite against a team that it lost to each of the last 2 years. This game always feels close, though. It always feels close, decided by 10 or less each of the last 3 seasons. I'm going to take Kentucky to win, South Carolina to cover. So I'll go Kentucky 21-14. 2 of the 5 touchdowns scored in this game, non-offensive touchdowns. And that's combined for both teams. Expect that to be something that we see play out in this one. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, so we've been talking for a while about Kentucky's offense, and I just think Dow Loggins isn't it. Like, I just have not.
You mean South Carolina's offense?
Yes, sorry.
Kentucky's offense. Colby Brain.
Sorry.
You're good.
South Carolina. There we go. So anyway, we've been talking about South Carolina's offense for a minute. I just think Dow Loggins isn't it. And a lot of my reason for that was, or if you look at this team last year, yeah, the offensive line wasn't that good, obviously. But at the same time, there was a pretty good amount of talent on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah, Juice Wells got hurt. We get it. But Leggett turning into what he did, Spencer Rattler, who has looked nothing short of an awesome outside of that system. Now, granted, there was
he looked good in the system last year, though. Like, he looked good within the development process, not so much the schematic elements of it.
But that's kind of it, though, right? He was the adult in the room, right? And now you've gone from him to a quarterback who has not played before, to your point, in Sellers. And in my mind, I'm like, well, okay, if you have a guy who can kind of get it himself, he can exist outside of this offense enough to where you won't have to really run the plays called, kind of like Milroe did. So I think this is going to be rough as far as the offensive side for South Carolina, because if you look at the leadership last year on the offensive side of the ball, none of those guys were there, right? And there were guys who were really bought into this program who were all pulling the same way. And I think that, that's an element that I may have even underrated when it comes to my projection of this team and my happiness of Sellers, is that Sellers doesn't need to just be a good starting quarterback. He needs to be the adult in the room in this offense in the way that Spencer Rattler was, to make this offense serviceable. And that's kind of what I've thought forever. To your point about the receivers, I mean, yeah, we could go, we could blame all kinds of stuff, but at the end of the day, if something is always someone's fault, it feels like it just becomes the coach's fault at a point where the O-line's bad, the receivers are bad. Fine. Dow Loggins has a background for tight ends. Are their tight ends awesome?
Josh Simon had a couple of nice moments in that game. So far, are you talking like the whole Beamer era? Because obviously,
no, just right now. Like, do you trust their tight ends right now?
I would trust them more than the receivers right now, because their receivers didn't spend spring ball with them. The Nick Harbor thing, that opener with 0 touches for him wasn't particularly inspiring. Looks like somebody that's still obviously figuring out the position. I'd trust their tight ends more than their receivers.
But see, that's what I'm saying right there. Getting Nick Harbor no touches has nothing to do with his progression as a football player. Harold Perkins was out here just being Bobby Boucher as a freshman. Why do we need Nick Harbor to learn how to play football for him to get on the field on this team? The issue with this team is they have nobody. To think we're gonna mold this kid into a nice young man till he gets his reps, brother.
He's on the field. He's on the field. He's just not. He's not, like, the separation issues are becoming evident with him. Yes, because if you play 10 yards off of a guy and you're just saying we're going to give you, like, we'll give you everything underneath, he still has not mastered that. And I agree with you. He needs to get football. Like, you have to find a way.
So if you're 10 yards off of a guy who's very fast, you just throw him a bubble screen. Like, that's just not, that's what I'm saying. That's not a separation issue. That is, if you're giving a guy 10 yards, don't throw it deep to him. If all you know how to do is 2 things, then yeah, every position group looks like they're in disarray. But, like, I just keep going back to this about South Carolina's offense, where I'm like, I don't know. Like, yeah, last year, like I said, when I realized how much talent they had last year, I went, uh-oh. Because now I'm going, if you can't, like, look at the Luther Burden thing where we were all like, oh my gosh, they got to get an offensive coordinator. Look at how they got him involved. And we said that was kind of, you shouldn't be doing that. Right now, South Carolina needs to do that with Nick Harbor, because they're not even at the level that Drink was at whenever he was hiring an offensive coordinator, because they have a guy who is maybe the best athlete in college football, and I'm hearing they can't get him the ball because the DBs are playing off. Like, that's the easiest coverage in the world to beat. Just throw him the ball immediately.
Yeah, I mean,
like, what?
No, I agree with you. Like, I think there are certain elements to that are a bit beyond just as simple as he's fast, get him the football. Otherwise, every track star would be playing football. I do think that there are ways in which they can manufacture touches that they have not yet, that they need to. You simply will not have any offensive identity, anybody on that offense that scares you. South
Right.
Carolina right now has nobody that scares them outside of Nick Harbor's 100-meter dash. That's
Hmm.
it. Like
But it's
those.
not just the 100-meter dash. This guy's not Trendon Holiday. He's not 5'6". He's a tank. So like that's the other part of it is he's not just a fast guy. You could play this guy at running back if you wanted to, assuming you could get him to not fumble. You could play this guy at tight end if you wanted to. Just get him in there somewhere. So like that's my thing. If they had this great, like if they were Oklahoma or something and they had this great offense, I mean with like Lincoln Riley, it's like, oh, we just can't find a place for this guy on the field. It's like, well, that makes sense. Teach him to be a great young man. He'll be a starter as a junior and he'll get drafted in the first round. Awesome. Now I'm kind of at a place where it's like, well, bro, people are coming to South Carolina to get looks. Like at the end of the day, Rattler came here because he knew that it would be okay. I can figure my stuff out here. I'm not going to be fighting a 5-star. This is going to be my situation. If you're going to be recruiting 5-stars, we're talking about this with Auburn, to be fair. We're talking about this with Auburn with a great offensive line. And we're saying he's got to get these receivers the ball or nobody's going to come commit to you. If you found a way to land this Loch Ness monster and you cannot get him the ball at this stage when you've already proven nobody else can catch the ball, okay, he will drop the ball and so will everyone else.
Yeah, it's a problem. Major problem. By the way,
Yeah.
we got storms in the background. If you hear that, that's not sandstorm. That's actual storms outside of my window right now in beautiful Orlando. You're right. They have to. I think that staff knows that they have to. They're playing him. He's getting snaps. Last year, he was getting snaps. We talked about the variation of touches for Nick Harbor. Everything was coming back to the football. Everything. Because everybody and their mother, when they see him, knows if you get beat by Nick Harbor, just fire your. If you get beat deep by that guy, fire yourself as a defensive coordinator. You did not do what you were supposed to do to be able to contain him. And so it's like he might as well have this massive target on himself whenever he steps on the field, which is, I'm not saying that that means that it defends South Carolina's inability to get him the football. It means for a guy figuring out the position, it is making it that much tougher when he did not have those spring reps because he's running track. And that's the problem. And Beamer talked about that. They basically, I think, were without like their top 3 receivers in spring ball. And that's been a major issue with Lenore Sellers, is like getting on the same page with these guys. They just don't have the reps that they should. And that is going to hold this team back. I don't know that it necessarily means that they're just going to have no success whatsoever in the passing game. Maybe they can have some in this matchup, but on the road, I don't really have a whole lot of confidence. I think this is going to have to be a big time 1-2 punch Rocket Sellers, Lenora Sellers game if they're going to have any sort of chance offensively.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. That was my way to come around saying I think Kentucky, as kind of tough as Kentucky like has been to predict in some moments, if you look at their schedule, it feels like they're just giving Kentucky this Georgia game earlier and earlier in the year, just to kind of like make them like take their medicine like a cat. And like now they got Georgia in week 3. So like Stoops, this is the warm up game for Georgia. So I'm like looking around and I'm like, well, if they struggle in this game, I mean, maybe he does want to struggle on purpose. Stoops is that kind of guy to get that Youngstown out of him for the Georgia game. But no, I think at this point in his career, he's kind of over that. I think he's kind of over the gamesmanship. He wants to smack these guys and move on and be preparing for Georgia at halftime. And I think that if you're Kentucky and you can bring in the transfer quarterback, which, you know, it's great. You could kind of say, okay, here we are. You know, we don't have to worry about breaking in a new guy in this same way. Now, granted, yeah, Vandegrift has not been a starter, but he has been around in those rooms. He's been around the SEC. He was a 5-star quarterback. He's a little bit more of a known commodity as far as we already kind of know where the strengths and weaknesses are. And so point being, you know, I think that a Kentucky team, like, you don't want to play Kentucky when you're disorganized. I'll put you like that. You do not want to play Kentucky when you're disorganized. They will smell blood and just start throwing guys at you that came out of Wyoming or something, and that you're like, what? Who is this character? And so that's the key. So like South Carolina did, I always talk about their swamp monsters on defense. They found that guy, which is a really big deal. That's awesome. That's going to create a lot of, you know, chaos. But at the same time, there's chaos on both sides of the ball, and they're creating both of them.
Dylan Stewart might need to have a 2022 Harold Perkins Arkansas day.
Yeah.
For South Carolina to be able to pull this one out. All right, well, Houston on the road, number 15, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a 30-point favorite in this one. The over-under I have is 1 third down conversion for Oklahoma's first-team offense. Just one. That's it. That's all we're asking for. The first-team offense had 0 third down conversions in the opener. The first and only Oklahoma third down conversion all game for those first-teamers. That was on the, well, actually, that didn't come. For Oklahoma as a whole, it was the final offensive play of the day. It was an 8-yard touchdown run. That is a weird stat for the team that won 51-3, that they could not convert these third downs. It's not a good stat, and it's definitely something that needs to get cleaned up before the meat of that Oklahoma schedule hits. Because if you don't have an identity on third down to be able to turn to against really good competition, you don't need me to tell you that. Venables actually looked like he sent out the first team offense for one extra series than what I was expecting to basically try and iron out some of those issues on third down. But instead, the Sooners end up going 3-and-out in that spot. I watched that whole game because I'm a sicko, so I'll provide a little bit of context on this. And it's gonna. I'm not making excuses for it, but I do think context is important. Injuries played a pretty significant role, I thought, in that in particular, because their most experienced offensive lineman, Troy Everett, was out. Venables said he's close to returning. Oklahoma's starting center, Branson Hickman, went down 10 snaps into the game. Not ideal for a quarterback in his second career start to suddenly have a new center, which we know centers are important with being able to call out blitzes, identify the mic, all those different things.
Snap the football, as we learned last year at Alabama.
Very important, underrated thing is simply snapping it successfully. Hickman's been practicing. He's apparently good to go for week 2, so that's good news for Oklahoma. Oklahoma receiver Andrell Anthony, the guy who was leading the team in receiving before he went down last year. He was playing his first game back. He is still very much working his way back from injury. He only played 8 snaps in this one. All-Bane the drum team member, Nick Anderson, not the Orlando Magic one, the one without the K in his name. He was banged up in camp, so he was held out of that opener as kind of a precaution. They need him for the long haul. And then Jaleel Farouk, he breaks his foot in the opener, and he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. So a strength of this team, something I talked about a lot in the offseason, is these Oklahoma pass catchers and how I feel like that's going to ease their transition into the SEC. That was a major issue in the opener, and it felt like the only guy that Jackson Arnold could really trust was Deion Burks. And Burks was awesome, looks as advertised, 3 touchdowns in that opener. That guy's going to make plays all over the place, but Oklahoma needs to stay healthy, period. Like, they just have to stay healthy, because otherwise I'm not sure that Jackson Arnold has a true deep threat in that passing game. And that offensive line that's been in question, they can't really afford to lack that continuity. They desperately need continuity with all those moving pieces. So having said that, Jackson Arnold goes on Feinbaum and he says, Oklahoma's opening up the playbook against Houston. Didn't have the full arsenal on their, to be able to roll out there in some of those spots. So who knows? Maybe that's going to make a difference. By the way, Houston just got smoked by Barry Odom-led UNLV. Smoked. Okay? Lost by 3 touchdowns. Not great. So if you're wondering, why is Oklahoma a 30-point favorite against a Houston team that's actually in the Big 12 now? Willie Fritz. I think we all like Willie Fritz. That's why. That's it. Because their turnover is very, very significant. I think Oklahoma pitches a shutout. I think Oklahoma wins this 35-0. Some good vibes, return to that passing game, and Oklahoma hits the over on 1 third down conversion.
I'm sorry, the brain gymnastics I just did with COVID were just so electric. I was like, oh, Houston's bad? That's crazy, because I feel like they've gotten up and scared some teams. I was like, yeah, last year they really hung in there with Texas. Then I was like, actually, I like their head coaching hire. This is after you just told me that Barry Odom had just smushed them. And you're like, oh, it's really...
Did you hear
that? That one.
Did you see that one?
You're actually in a scary movie right now.
I am. That was horrifying. If you're on the YouTube audience and you just heard that, I thought my house was about to just go without power, basically.
How's your internet still on? That's crazy.
How is my internet still on? That's unbelievable. Oh my goodness.
Back to Barry Odom, expert difficulty unlocked. So basically, I was telling these guys, or I was talking about these guys are my internal voices. I was thinking to myself, okay, I really like them. That's interesting. And then of course they just got smushed, because the stuff that we think will work with coaching hires never works the way we think it will. Because Houston has always been kind of like that team that's, they got Holgerson. They're kind of a tough out. They're kind of whatever. Nah. So yeah, to your point, every season's kind of a vacuum. I love the we didn't open up the playbook quote. That's like the old I'm going to run some stuff I'm less familiar with. There'll be more turnovers, so watch out. But at the same time, this is not the opponent. Apparently, I was really excited to see this, but was not keeping up with the Houston UNLV game enough, apparently.
Yeah, no, you weren't dialed into that one? You weren't.
If I had known Barry Odom was in town when I was in Vegas, I might have paid a visit to his office to see how he gets down. But outside of that, no, can't say I was.
Yeah, not great. Houston, a team that could struggle very much with that 30-day window. Looks like it's going to be a rough early start for them. But Oklahoma's defense looked awesome in the opener, and that's kind of the thing that's going to have to be really, really good for them to be able to kind of beat some of those better teams in the SEC with that schedule that is very well documented how difficult it is. Houston will not look like one of those better teams. Okay.
Yep.
Oklahoma should win this one very, very convincingly. All right. Mississippi State against Arizona State. Arizona State's a 6.5-point favorite. The over-under I have for this one is one picture of Blake Shapen in a baseball. Well, here's how I should phrase this. One picture of Blake Shapen playing baseball and football in an Arizona State uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Did we follow that? Doing the Bo Jackson thing. That'll be the image. People forget he committed to ASU to be a two-sport athlete. Wanted to play baseball, wanted to play football. Decommitted December before his signing day, just as a certain true freshman, Jaden Daniels, emerged at Arizona State. We got, holy cow, this storm is.
You gotta start singing Garth pretty soon, man.
Oh my god, I felt that one. My gosh, but yeah, Blake Shapen playing against the team that he was once committed to. Ultimately, he ends up flipping to Baylor, by the way, in the recruiting process. For those who have followed his career and know kind of the story, I actually think that's probably something that we need to. I don't want to say we should rule it impossible, but I think it is so unbelievably unlikely to see these guys that play quarterback at the core 4 level also trying to play another sport. I don't know that you can do it anymore. I understand people are going to be like, oh, like Kyler Murray, like he was able to do it. He was able to pull it off. Probably also helps that he's got Lincoln Riley in his ear and he's a former 5-star recruit who's insanely talented. But as for pretty much everybody else, like even John Rice Plumlee did it at a very high level for what he was trying to do. Did John Rice Plumlee have the baseball career that he thought he was going to? Probably not. Did he end up developing as a passer in the way that he probably hoped he would? Probably.
Well, he played for Gus, so his hopes shouldn't have been too high.
This is true, but
it's managing expectations, brother. If you thought you were going to turn into Cam Newton, I'll let you know why you won't.
I will not tolerate any John Rice Plumlee slander on this show. I will not, even though I was the one that kind of threw that out there. But still, I just think it's really hard to do that. And I don't know, maybe I don't want to say that we should just kind of laugh off kids attempting to do that because chase your dreams, do all that stuff. But at some point, Blake Shapen realized I can't do that. Maybe he's going to be one of those guys that goes back and plays baseball like 6 years from now or 4 years from now or something like that. If football doesn't end up being a path for him. But yeah, the little wrinkle that you'll see probably early on in this game will be interesting. It'll be like, oh, Blake Shapen, you were super athletic coming out of just a kid out of Shreveport, as one does, certain. Jacob Hester was once a 2-sport star, I believe. Hester played another sport, I think, right? Maybe? I don't know. Yep. I'll ask Hester about that.
I will say, hey, don't forget about the dreadlocks of doom, Chad Jones, LSU legend, 2-time national champion in football and baseball. So there's the guy, right?
It's different now, though. Like there's just there's so much that's expected. Like I think it's the roster turnover with how quickly you have to you have new receivers coming in and out and stuff like that. There's more turnover at coordinator spots. Yeah. I think it's just tougher now.
And I mean, few are athletic because he played defense. That's the other thing. Few are athletic enough to play defense, which is like it's not to say it's easier than playing quarterback, but it's just more athletically tuned to where you're either kind of got it or you don't. If you play SEC DB,
just quarterback, by the way.
That's quarterback is just like Jameis is another good example of a guy. So where I was going here is we said this during media days, which is, hey, little recruits, I don't know why you're listening to me, but if you're listening to this podcast, if a coach tells you that you are going to play both offense and defense, if a coach tells you that you are going to play 2 different sports to get you on campus, they're lying to you, brother. I'm just letting you know that right now. Every single time we hear about a guy, you might get some carries as a running back. Oh, I don't know. He used to play defense in high school. Oh, he's got a hell of an arm. He can play baseball. He can play on their baseball. He can play on their basketball team too. Outside of the guys that ended up as NFL tight ends, like a Julius Peppers, that's not going to happen for you, brother. So if you're committing to somewhere based on what the basketball team is going to do and you're a football recruit or the baseball team, don't do that. I'm just letting you know that right now because the guys, unless you think you're Shohei Ohtani and you're one of the top 2 athletic people in the world, or Jack, what's his name from Florida? If you can't do that, don't try to play 2 sports.
Look, I'm just saying, Caglione is who you're thinking.
Caglione, there we
go. And that's, 2 positions, so it's the Shohei thing, not as much the 2-sport thing. But look, we're going to get to somebody in Lad of the Week that is, I guess, showing that he can do multiple things in obviously historic ways. But I think for Shapen, really important game for what he's
Mhm.
trying to do this year, and it's going to be a good indication of how he's going to handle SEC defenses. Big test for him. Big test for this Mississippi State defense. As basura as Arizona State was last year, it's still one of the better offensive minds in the sport. And Kenny Dillingham, at least one of the more respected up and coming offensive minds. Tons and tons of new pieces on that Mississippi State defense who are going to be tested. They're going to have some spots where they're just going to be put on islands. That's probably why they're a touchdown underdog in this game. Fun fact, Arizona State has never beat an SEC team, ever. I don't know that they faced that many, but I saw the stat out there. Like Kenny Dillingham was talking about that in his presser, like trying to get students to be able to show up to this one. It's going to be 10:30 start on the East Coast. We got more. We got more thunder. We got more lightning. Goodness gracious. Other fun fact, Will. I had a 1 year stretch in middle school where I was dead set on attending Arizona State, not as a two-sport athlete. Like Blake
Oh
Shapen.
my God, you would have been miserable.
I think it would.
I couldn't think of a place that is less Conor O'Gara than Tempe, Arizona.
Tempe.
Is that
how
right?
we? Tempe?
No Tempe. We're doing Arizona pronunciations with the COVID break.
My bad. You're right. I think 8th grade Connor or 7th grade Connor realized that because I very quickly was like, you know what, Connor, this vacation that you went on in 6th grade was great. And you loved Tempe. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. Cool region of the country. I don't think I would have fared particularly well. Our friend Matt Berry, he's been able to do just fine going to Arizona State, and everything worked out well for him. I think my path would have been a little bit different, but anyways, other last fun fact for you. This line opened, I think, at Arizona State is a 2.5 point favorite, and it's ballooned to Arizona State -6.5. I'm gonna do the dumb thing. Okay. I'm admitting this is dumb. So ears perk up. Don't blame me if you follow me and do that dumb thing with me. Do the opposite of what I'm doing. Fade me hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that Shapen continues the deep ball prowess. He had 2 50-yard completions in the opener, which matched Mississippi State's entire 2023 total. Pretty crazy to think about that. I'm going to pick Mississippi State to win outright. I think they go on the road. I think they have a little bit something in that passing game, a little bit of juice for the Bulldogs on the road. And it doesn't quite give us full Pac-12 after dark vibes. And this isn't Pac-12 because Arizona State's in the Big 12 now.
Mm-hmm.
But we get at least some of those. And we trick ourselves into thinking, this is the only thing that we have now for Pac-12 after dark. This is fun. This is back and forth. These teams kind of make dumb plays and don't really make a whole lot of sense. And they're both kind of figuring out who they are. And that's what we need to be able to see very, very late nights, each and every Saturday night.
These are 2 football teams that have been kind of, in flux for the last couple of years. I wish we could have seen the versions of these teams that employed Herm Edwards and Mike Leach, just so I could see the pregame press conferences and the quotes back and forth they would have.
Great
point. But this is actually a closer second than I think people are realizing. Because you made a great point about Kenny Dillingham, great offensive mind. And we see the exact same thing on the other sideline with Jeff Lebby, right? So these are 2 teams that kind of went for that established voice. Obviously, Mike Leach tragically passed away. Different situation, just didn't work out for Herm Edwards. But these 2 teams have found similar paths forward, which is we're going to take the young kind of, bud off of this great coaching tree, be it Oregon, with Dillingham, he's had a longer history in that, Lebby too, the Lane Kiffin thing, summarizing here, of course. And so this really could be, a coming out party for one of these teams, not for the national stage, not, oh my God, everybody watch out for Mississippi State. But if these things work, if Arizona State's current version works, if Mississippi State works, this could very easily be the game you look at and go, oh, wait, we can actually do this, because both of these teams have a little bit of roster attrition. Both of them are not known to be great defenses. So if you get one of these offenses humming in a way the other one isn't quite, this game could be easily a runaway win. And I think that this is going to be super duper fascinating because, to your point, there's not a lot of history here. Arizona State, like you said, has never been an SEC team. Now, I would hope they're rushing to schedule Brian Kelly week 1, because that could be anybody.
Sure.
But point B, couldn't be UCLA until a couple years ago. Anyway, so that's Coach O. Anyway, so point being, both of these coaches are super duper smart coaches that just kind of happen to be in these places, for lack of a better term. Like no super strong ties, you know what I'm saying, either way. So I think that it is very interesting to see kind of the story of this game. And you know what? I lied there. Kenny Dillingham is an alum of Arizona State. I definitely, he started
it's a strong tie. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's an alum. He's now coming back for the first time since 2014. So the point being, like, these are both young minds who are going to kind of shape these teams in their images. And this could be the beginning of some type of a DVD. Not saying it's going to be a championship, conference championship, anything like that, but respectable era of football that both of these pretty proud fan bases have craved. Yeah, I think this could be something.
I think I don't know that it's so much the DVD. I don't think you make a full DVD for seasons like this, but it's the nobody believes in us hype video.
Yeah.
That gets the 5 minute. These are like feature films now. What are we doing with these? Like get them condensed. You don't need to be 5 minutes. But it's an Arizona State team that was, I believe, picked to finish dead last in the Big 12. A Mississippi State team that was picked to finish second to last in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be playing this game at night against a core 4 opponent and telling yourself, see, this is why you should have believed in us. So it's big for the future hype videos.
Exactly.
You will see whoever wins this game, like, just count the amount of times you see a clip from this night in those, future hype videos that come out down the road. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Do people still make championship DVDs? Is that still a thing?
I know they make coffee table books for things less than championships. So I feel like, 10 wins with Mississippi State, 9 wins, you probably get a coffee table book. I think that would be a good thing to look forward to. But yeah, I think video teams are having a great time. I actually didn't even pick this game. I do think this is going to be, I don't know, man. Actually, if Arizona State's a 6.5 point favorite, they cruised week 1. I actually think I'm going to take Arizona State to barely cover this.
That makes me feel better that we hedged on this. That was smart. Good thinking on you. All right, well, let's close with this one. Number 14, Tennessee, 8-point favorite against number 24, NC State. This game in Charlotte. The over-under I have is 240 Tennessee rushing yards. Why 240? That sounds random, Connor. It's never random. Ever. Sometimes it's random. Mostly never random. NC State let up 120 rushing yards in the opener to Western Carolina. Not great. I doubled that because Tennessee is at least twice as good at running the football as an FCS team, I would think. Mm-hmm. Even one who was within 3 points of NC State in the middle of the fourth quarter. Not a great showing. Not a great showing from a top 25 team in their first game without last year's Butt Kiss Award winner Peyton Wilson, who totally didn't rob Edgerrin Cooper of that award, but I digress. Mm-hmm. If I'm Josh Heupel, I'm listening to all this talk about Nico for Heisman. Peter Burns saying it. You got Booger saying that he was the best quarterback of anybody in college football week 1. A lot of love for our man, Nico Iamaleava. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'm listening to all of that. And I'm going, buddy, we're going to do what we do best. And that is run the football. We're going to put teams on their heels. We're going to spread them out. And we're going to run the football until they tap out. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get defensive linemen with hands on their hips. We're going to make them gassed. And we're going to treat this like a track meet. That is what they will do. But a track meet with the ground and pound approach. That's been the Josh Heupel MO. In a game like this, I think you have to be able to speed up what that's going to look like for an NC State defense that is just trying to show we're better than just losing somebody like Peyton Wilson. I think that's going to be an obvious game plan for Tennessee, and I think it's going to be a successful one. Have Nico hit a few of those shot plays, but if he ends up throwing the ball less than 25 times, it's not going to surprise me. I think this is a huge, huge Dylan Sampson game, like real big. He's going to get going in the passing game too. He was awesome in the opener. On the other side of the ball, you saw NC State in that season opener. Grayson McCall, one of the most experienced quarterbacks in all of college football. I feel like he's been playing college football since like the Bush administration. Mm-hmm. He was at Coastal.
He's been trying to escape Coastal Carolina since like COVID.
Poor guy, man.
Just
poor guy.
His transcripts
like 4-time Sun Belt Player of the Year, Grayson McCall.
He has like a Harold and Kumar style movie series of him trying to escape from Coastal Carolina. They just keep bringing him back.
It's like, it's not that bad. It's fun here. Remember the mullets? We enjoyed this. We had some good times. But Grayson McCall, I think you saw in that opener, he's still figuring out what this is going to look like in this system and in transitioning to NC State. This speed that I think he's been able to play at before. He's been really good as a decision maker. Like, he's had no shortage of defensive ends that he has had to read playing the type of offense that they played at Coastal. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's anything new to him or anything like that. I'm not sure there's a lot to read with James Pierce Jr. besides, is that guy in my grill or is he not? More times than not, he's in your grill.
You don't have time to read. He's just there.
Buddy, just react. Just go.
Exactly.
Just go. So I wonder about that matchup and what that looks like for him as they're facing a Tennessee team that I would imagine they're going to want to try and speed him up a bit. In the playoff era, Will, here are NC State's wins against AP top 15 teams. AP top 15 at the time of the matchup. 2017, they beat number 14 or number 12 Florida State, who, as we know, went on to crumble that year. Last year, the Jimbo Fisher and Tallahassee, not particularly good. 2021, beat number 9 Clemson, who was a 9-3 team despite DJ Uyunglele being DJ Uyunglele. I am not picking NC State to win this game. Those are their only 2 wins against AP top 15 teams in the playoff era. That's not great. 10-year sample size. That's enough to me. And NC State's built itself into a really solid program and one that has seemingly been like that fringe top 25 team kind of on a yearly basis. At least it's felt like that. I will predict, however, NC State to cover because I think Kevin Concepcion, I think he kind of gets some of those chunk plays behind that Tennessee secondary that I have a lot of questions about. So I do think he has like a 2 or 3 touchdown game in which Tennessee's like still struggling to find those answers for him in the fourth quarter. But I'm going to go with Tennessee to win this one 34-28. So it's an NC State cover of that spread.
This game is so fascinating. So it's being played not at NC State Stadium, but at the Carolina Panthers Stadium.
Charlotte.
What's up?
I always say Charlotte instead of Charlotte because I think it just sounds better.
Yeah, that's fair. That's probably how it was intended. Yeah. So like, point being, that does matter in terms of, are you seeing a red crowd or you're seeing kind of an orange and red crowd? And that was, this game being in North Carolina would be kind of one of the bigger benefits for NC State because it feels like outside, like a lot of the Joe Milton hype was this guy can win pretty much any quarterback. He won with an Old Dominion quarterback, whatever. He's won with anybody. That just happened to be the one quarterback he kind of couldn't figure out. Whatever. Emily feels like he's exactly the quarterback that Josh Heupel wants. And I feel like when you juxtapose that with NC State, who like Dave Doran's a great coach and he definitely like punches people in the face and that's how he wins. And like that punch you in the face style should be what takes apart a team like Tennessee. Also should have happened with Iowa, to be honest. I know Grayson McCall is a great college quarterback. I know he can make a lot of the throws. I know he's really confident, brash, a lot of the things that we like about Texas. You could say the same thing there. But this is an NC State team that I just don't think offensively they have that same innovation that Josh Heupel does. And I think that the defense, and to be clear, their defense has been awesome. Like that's been the staple of their last, their DC has been there 6 seasons. And like they've been a pretty solid, at least defense every year. And that's really in the wins, the defense has really shown. And I understand that. And I also understand that Josh Heupel has struggled when he gets off his play script, which we'll come back to that bit because with Ayamaleava, I think he's going to fix that. I think that the scripted play Josh Heupel like completely turning to dust with Joe Milton is not going to happen anymore because it didn't happen as much with Hendon Hooker. We keyed on it before the great season, but when Hendon Hooker grew up and was able to make plays with his legs, that's when it really started to equal out a little bit more. And I think that Ayamaleava in game 1 showed that he could do that. So he could keep plays alive with his legs, do that type of stuff. So I think that, this offense will be able to stay on the field because of that. And I think that because of their kind of boldness, I'm not as worried about them. And like, it's kind of one of those things with Josh Heupel where it's like, if he can't win with Ayamaleava and kind of like this cast of guys with Pierce, I feel like we're starting to get toward a little bit of the ceiling where it's like, okay, because that team that beat Alabama was special. I'm not taking anything away from that. He assembled a lot of that team. It was pretty early in his coaching career. But for this, it's like, we need to start seeing that. We need to start seeing them being a wagon coming to town, scaring people, not making it into like a tight, like a clinch fest in the third and fourth quarters as the other team kind of figures out the offense. So I think this could be a coming out party for Ayamaleava on the national stage, not like the Mississippi State one where this could be the beginning of some type of championship DVD or the Ayamaleava kind of legend in the SEC. I don't think that NC State has the talent to actually stop that from happening. We're going to see how it happens in the SEC, but I do find myself trusting Josh Heupel in these moments now.
I do too. And I think you've had a lot of time to game plan for this one as well. Despite what coaches say, it wasn't just Chattanooga that you were prepping for. I think you've had plenty of time to be able to do your scouting on what this NC State defense is going to throw at you. NC State seems confident that they're going to be able to handle the tempo. We'll see. We'll see
Mhm.
what that looks like. Maybe they have moments where they do. Maybe Nico's going to have moments in which you kind of are reminded, yes, this is still as promising as this looks. This is still going to be a guy in his third career start, and there
Mhm.
could be a growing pain moment or two, or where maybe he telegraphs a pick or something like that, or he tries to pick up extra yardage that's just not there, and he fumbles, or it's stuff like that is still going to be a part of this. Okay, it can still be incredibly good and feel like it's special even if those moments happen. That's just natural. That's going to happen. But I do think that we're reminded Tennessee has a very clear offensive identity. And that is something that so many teams are striving to obtain. They can talk culture, they can talk, we're going to beat you in the trenches, we're going to do this, that, and the other. Tennessee has something that it can truly fall back on, and they know that the other team is going to have to adjust to what they are doing and not vice versa.
Mhm.
In a game like this that I expect to be competitive is so beneficial. And I think Tennessee truly leans on that more ways than one. And I think that ends up being the difference. These are the moments where, as much as you appreciate having your superstar next Peyton Manning, Nico Iamaleava, as you're so beautifully pronouncing, I just love it, Will. You're doing it with your
Mhm.
chest. I love it. You're going to appreciate the fact that you have this ground game and that you can scheme that well with that type of tempo and have this entrenched of an identity. So I think Tennessee wins this football game and gets a little bit of that early season momentum going that I think they need. They got to have that swagger going into this SEC schedule because it is a difficult one that they will face.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be a 10-point win for Tennessee. I'm going to say like high 20s to high 30s. Let's go 28-38.
28-38. 38-28 or
Yeah, there
28-38.
we go. There we go. 38-28.
All right, let's do some lock of the week. 1-0, baby. 1-0. Never a doubt. Thank you to Iowa for that
Mhm.
40-0 win. Brian Ferentz sitting at home, probably eating. No, actually, I think he was at the Maryland game because he is an offensive analyst. Kirk Ferentz sitting at home, I
Mhm.
believe, watching on his TV like, those my guys out there? What are they doing? I didn't tell them to score. How dare they? That's rude. First half,
Looks like they gave him the day off in Maryland too.
did he? What was the
Maryland
score?
crushed UConn.
Right, but do we give Brian Ferentz credit for any of those touchdowns?
No, that's what I'm saying. I
Oh,
think he
okay.
stayed home.
Yeah, he stayed home. Yeah, wasn't on the clock for
Mhm.
Saturday. The fact that I had to sweat out a 6-0 first half and had to tweet out an apology for my lock of the week. Look, it's week one. I'm not in midseason form yet. I apologized way too early. I take that back. Should never have apologized. Iowa offense, they didn't just give me 3 offensive touchdowns like I promised. They gave me 5. So we're feeling very, very good. Let's stay hot here. Colorado plus 7.5. It's my lock of the week. With the hook, I understand. Always makes you a little bit nervous. This is more of a bet against Nebraska than it is a bet for Colorado. It is. I'll just be honest. Last 5 seasons, Nebraska only has 3 home wins of at least 2 scores against Power 5 competition. Let me repeat that because that's stunningly bad. Nebraska in the last 5 seasons only has 3 home wins of at least 2 scores against Power 5 competition. Nebraska got 27 votes in the AP poll after beating UTEP. Good God. UTEP's 8-16 over the last 2 years. 7 consecutive seasons without a bowl berth, 7 consecutive seasons without a win against an AP top 25 team. I'm not saying Colorado's a top 25 team. Okay, this is a bet against Nebraska, not for Colorado. A lot of
Mhm.
weaknesses, a lot of strengths that Colorado has. By a lot, I mean like 2, and you know who they are. Here's the thing that frustrates me. If I have to deal with another week of Dylan Raiola, Pat Mahomes comps, I'm going
Is
to
this the
lose.
most annoying quarterback matchup in the history of football?
No, let's not go that far. Come on, there's gotta be there's guys who have like done stuff that you're like, I'm
I
not
said
rooting for that guy.
annoying. I didn't say they were terrible people. I
Okay.
didn't call anybody names.
Ugh.
Wearing a watch on the sideline and say what time is it is annoying. I love it. Doesn't make you a bad person. It's annoying.
All right, I'm gonna throw it into consideration. You're right. It might be the most annoying quarterback matchup that we've had in recent memory. I just can't do the Dylan Raiola Pat Mahomes thing.
Yep.
Dylan Raiola can get to a Super Bowl, and I probably would still be like, let's not compare him to Pat Mahomes. Let's not
Yep.
do that. What are we doing here? Oh, they look alike. Did you know that they look alike? They look alike, and they kind of Pat Mahomes when Pat Mahomes tweeted like at Dylan Raiola, I was like, oh God, he just gave this thing another year, another 2 years worth of legs that we don't need. And it's just because it's an 18-year-old kid. I don't need that for an 18-year-old kid yet who has not done anything yet. And I hope he has great success. I really do. But just very much annoy me.
I love
Anyway,
the move to cosplay as Pat Mahomes and then be like, why are you guys comparing me to Pat Mahomes?
compare yourself to Luke McCown or something, man.
That's all these fake news media people. What I never say that, brother. You literally are. You have a Taylor Swift tattoo. What are you talking about?
Does he really?
I'm just kidding. That was a
Oh,
joke.
okay. Okay. I was gonna say that's reaching a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, as I mentioned with the Jackson Dart thing that I talked about, with I had moments where I wondered if Jackson Dart was just doing a Matt Corral imitation while trying to play quarterback. It's like just be yourself. Just
You
be
just
yourself.
wanted to like him.
Yeah, it's like what, come on, man. Just do your thing. Don't try to
Mhm.
be Pat Mahomes. You're not Pat Mahomes. Okay, you're not because nobody is. But I'm going to take Colorado to cover 7.5, and I don't feel great about it, but I don't also feel great about the idea of Nebraska beating somebody at home by double digits. So that's my thinking. Very basic.
Yeah, I think that is a lot of Frost numbers, but at the same time, I don't think they're quite there yet. But I am interested.
They're like all Frost numbers, Will. Of course they are.
Mark me as interested. This is one of our long time conversations where I was like, well, we'll see if a coach can fix this. If I'm going to put the stake in that if Rule can't do it, it might not be able to be done because he feels like he's.
That's what
that
they
kind
said
of
about
guy.
Frost. Just
Not me, buddy.
not you, but they. They all
Mhm.
very much.
For sure.
All right. Colorado 7.5. Let's kick it to Neil. Always enjoy catching up with him. He's extremely well connected at Florida. Great insights into a developing situation. Yeah, I think we can call what's going on a developing situation. So here's Neil. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is our own Neil Blackmon. Neil, golly, there's no world in which I pictured Saturday in the swamp playing out the way that it did. And I got to say, you probably have heard all about the Miami hype this offseason. And even the biggest Miami believer probably didn't envision that exact scenario playing out. What was the initial reaction from everyone involved with seeing how unprepared Florida looked?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a fan base that I think despondent is probably the best word. Like it wasn't embarrassing; it was nauseating to a lot of people. It was something beyond embarrassing. Uh, just an absolutely nauseating performance. And honestly, like to the people that cover Florida as a program daily, which myself now included in that group. Um, I felt bad for the people that read me because you have to do your best, and you know this super well, right? You do your best to filter out what coaches tell you and look at the reality that's on the ground. But the reality here was this Florida roster slightly better than Miami's in the 24/7 composite. Probably not as much star power going in. We thought that, right? But more depth. We were sold that this was the best team that Napier had, that he felt that it was definitely the best, that it was definitely the deepest, that they had certain position rooms that were really, really good, that they didn't feel like they ever had a position room other than running back that was really, really good. He said we have 3 or 4 groups. Um, so and a lot of us said that to our readers in our writing and podcasts. And you're watching this and you're like, I feel horrible for what I've told these people. Because obviously none of this was true. And it isn't just that it was the second straight opening week face plan. I think this one, there's just no harm. There's no shame. No matter how it happened, there was no shame in losing at Utah, a place where a lot of people lose to an established coach like Kyle Whittingham, an established program. This was a chance to sort of host a mirror image program of yours. Third year, not so great their first 2 years under a new coach, but uptick in talent. Um, they felt good about the quarterback position. Florida felt good about the quarterback position. And there were just so many similarities. Both programs starved for winning again. Both programs without a title in 15 plus years. And I mean, they just came in and just absolutely. When the game was over, like the second play of the game, Damian Martinez rushed up the middle and moved the pile 7 yards.
Yeah.
And I looked at the journalist sitting next to me and just said, "That's not good."
You're not wrong.
And that was, I mean, Florida was not competitive from that play forward. They weren't competitive at any point in the game. Montrell Johnson goes 71 yards for a touchdown, and Florida doesn't come back. Florida got into that formation again. By the time that they got into that formation again, it was 31-10.
You can't
Like,
make this up.
what are you doing? Um, and and look, I think Billy's a high character guy. He's wonderful to talk to. He's a great person. I think he's the kind of guy who would coach high school football just because he likes working with young people. Like if he weren't, I don't. It's not a guy that was ever going to be in the NFL or anything like that. That's not his goal. Um, but when he took accountability, as I wrote at our site, but he also said like we've made progress, and you kind of look around the room and you're like, what progress?
Like
And
in football?
if you think you've made progress, then what kind of progress are you trying to make? Because and that gets to what Florida's largest problem is, which is I don't know what they want to be. I don't know what they're good at. And not only do I not know what they're really good at, I know Montrell Johnson's really good. I know, except for this game, Graham Mertz has been very good. Like I know Shamar James is a good linebacker. Um, but I don't know what Florida wants to be. I don't know what they want to be on defense when they run blitzes that look like they're coming from Jacksonville and they take about that long to develop. Um, I don't know what they want to be on offense. So it's not just that there's not proof of concept. It's that I don't even know what the concept they want to pursue is.
Neil, you heard Princely Umanmielen talk about this when he gets to Ole Miss, and I've brought it up a million times, and I'll probably have to bring it up a million times again, especially if things don't change for Florida defensively. But the fact that Princely Umanmielen, Florida's only All SEC defensive player the last 3 years, is saying the things you just said, that's a terrible sign for your defensive culture. And I thought it was an awful move by Billy to go, you know what? I'm going to hire the guy that worked out at Louisiana. I'm going to ignore the fact that he's been fired by his last two jobs. That Dave Aranda and Hugh Freeze said, nope, you're not it. We need to move on. We need to find somebody else to be better than you. And to me, like the defensive side of the ball is very well documented. It's almost like you can't even worry about that yet with all the problems that Florida has, because obviously you need to be able to score points. You need to find whatever your offensive identity is to have a chance in this league, and they certainly don't have that. But everybody's shifted to DJ Lagway and shifting to a guy that we expected to see this season. We talked about this, but not under these circumstances. What do you expect from Saturday? And we're recording this Wednesday afternoon, so we don't know officially if Graham Mertz is going to be playing or not. But playing or not, I would think Billy's going to have some sort of a plan for Lagway. And is there a possibility that he could actually turn to Lagway, even if Mertz is maybe, close to getting back?
Well, I think that it will be DJ Saturday, even if Graham is close. Now, the reasons for that might not please Florida fans. It would just be we don't need to run Graham Mertz out there because we need him for Texas A&M. And I think a lot of Florida fans respect Graham. He's a great guy. If you met him at SEC Media Days, you know what a nice kid he is.
Very nice. Yeah.
And I mean, objectively, had a terrific season last year. But I think Florida needs some joy. They need a spark. And DJ Lagway gives them a little something different. Also, the right side of I've never seen an offensive tackle grade out at 0.0 in pass blocking. So that was new to me. That was Cam Waite's PFF grade at right tackle, was 0.0. I've never seen that. So clearly, one side of this offensive line is just not competitive against quality opponents. Graham Mertz is not the type of runner that DJ is. DJ certainly not, a guy who was touted as someone who's going to run for 1,000 yards a season or anything. But like Cam Ward, certainly a guy who can make plays and extend plays with his legs. You even saw it on his touchdown drive against Miami, where he has a 16-yard run where he was flushed, and it sets up first and goal, converts on a third and long. So um, I think just a combination of needing something to give the fan base just one fun Saturday afternoon, because there's a decent chance they're underdogs in their final 10 games, which is an incredible thing to say.
Yeah.
But and then yeah, I mean, hopefully then you get enough from him moving forward where he's a part of whatever Florida's plan is, because Napier's going to go back to Graham Mertz, and people might not want to hear that, but that's what's going to happen. I would be stunned if you just said, I'm turning it over to DJ. I was also, but I was also stunned that they didn't have a package for Lagway. And what was weird about that was something consistently around the program that we were told was going to happen. Oh, we're gonna have something to integrate him, and then probably 10 days. I'm trying to remember if it was 10 or 11, but either way, it was a week and a half. They had just started Miami game prep, and we hear, well, we're really comfortable with Graham Mertz at number one, and we're going to develop DJ, but he's the backup. And they stopped talking about the package, and it was like, oh no, what are they doing here? So hopefully Lagway is incorporated into what they do moving forward. They're going to need him, because that the right side of that offensive line is disaster.
Tyler Barron was just feasting all
Yeah,
day.
I mean, a guy they blocked comfortably a season ago,
Yeah, at
with
Tennessee.
what they had, and then that gets back to this whole bill of goods. Oh, we feel confident. We're deeper up front. Well, Florida rotated 9 guys, and you talk to offensive line coaches, and they'll say it's good to have depth. It's not good to play 9 players, right? Like, you play your best 5. You want to have depth. But yeah, Florida's rotations were weird. They go and get Brendan Crenshaw Dixon. They feel like that's a nice pickup in the portal. He was terrible. Everybody saw the Damian George clip on the interception return where he just didn't even appear interested in pursuing the play. And like I said, that they start Cam Wade's a transfer from Louisiana who's coming off an Achilles heel tear. He grades out at 0-0. I mean, none of this is good, and that right side is just so poor.
Neil, I think a lot of people lack context when they look back on why a coach was fired, or the clip that Matt Berry, or not the clip, but the tweet that he had the other day. And I like Matt. I mentioned this on the recap pod the other day, where he's talking about, like, all that Mullen did, and Mullen gets fired, and look at what's happening right now at Florida. It's like, and I know that those guys they're tight, and it's very easy to go 1 + 1 = 4 and forget about all of the context that went into it with Mullen.
Yeah.
And that to me is like the part that kind of makes me sick, is like people that do that and just try and connect these dots and say, see, Florida fans were ridiculous. It's like, all right, well, you weren't protesting when Mullen was fired. You just forgot about like everything that was going on. Oh, we got background. We're good. We're powering through. As Billy says, you got to block out the noise.
Sorry.
Doing the best job of that. No, you're good. You're good, man. So that's I think important, because the context of this game is significant for those people that make those decisions. And they looked out at their stadium and saw Miami taking over, and saw fans emptying out in the middle of their season opener with 8 months of buildup for that game. Does that type of game prompt decision makers to huddle up and say, guys, what do we got to do? Are those conversations, do you think, happening at this point?
They are happening. They've happened Sunday. They happened yesterday. And I know that because I've talked to the people, but at least 3 of the people in those conversations. So they are happening. I don't know, Matt. I like his work. I mean, I think Matt's great. I saw Dan's retweet, and like, I think the best thing for Florida to do is just to focus on, like, especially Florida fans, that they want to defend the Mullen decision, and I think it's easily defensible, the dismissal of Mullen. All you really have to do is look at the roster that Billy Napier inherited at Florida and begin to understand it. Um, so my point is, the best thing for Florida to do is to focus on now, and not worry about what Dan Mullen is retweeting. So I think that's what these people are doing in those conversations, and they are. Uh, I think that they're trying to figure out, hey, Billy Napier, and let's be clear about something that I think is important and not yet really perceived by the outside, um, though maybe it should be. Napier's gotten everything that he wanted from the administration at Florida. Everything. Florida has maybe the nicest new football facility in the SEC, if not the country. It is just as nice as Clemson's, um, Lazy River and all.
It's beautiful.
It is astonishingly good. Florida has a new weight room. I mean, from everything, they have a new nutritional staff. I liked your joke about how I guess the new sports science of nutrition is not paying off. But all that stuff that they were way behind in, they went from 14th in recruiting budget to second. Um, this is not an infrastructure issue in Florida any longer. And let's point out there's that NIL perception, and the Jaden Rashada stuff doesn't help, of course. But the reality is, Florida Victorious just signed the most NIL deals of any collective in the country last year for its athletes. So they have rebuilt their collective to where it is an asset, not a liability or a problem. And whether smart person that knows a little more might say, well, that's for other sports. And also it is. But the point is that collective is humming. And they're humming with corporate money behind them, which is really the future of NIL. If you talk to NIL lawyers, I am one. Um, that's it. The model isn't sustainable with just big boosters. You have to have corporate money. So Florida's got all of that in place, and I think these people are meeting and saying, "Look, we're going to need a return on our investment." And the idea at Florida this year was always that if we go 7-5 or we go 6-6, then that actually might be progress given this schedule. But we need to see that progress, and we probably need to see something from DJ Lagway to where the fans see that progress and they're still bought in. You cannot go out against your arch rival, who, like I said, not arch rival, but a bitter rival who's similarly situated to you, like Miami is, and have that happen. So the conversations now are, all right, we have two games coming up at home against Texas A&M and M and Kentucky. Let's see what happens in those games. And, if those games don't go our direction, it's never too early to get your hat in coaching circle ring. So I would say Napier's, obviously his seat is flaming. And I'm sure Scott Strickland's name comes up in those conversations. No one I've spoken to directly has said anything about Scott in terms of his future, but history says you don't get to hire three football coaches as an athletic director.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
and I don't know how this started, but somehow one of the things is, well, Florida has an interim president and they can't fire the athletic director. That's not true. The Board of Governors entrusts the interim president with full authority to do all that. So if Florida needs to make changes, I would expect Napier and Strickland to be on the chopping block. And with Scott, that's a shame in many ways because he's wonderful at fundraising. He's a great person. Um, and he's gotten quite a few hires correct, uh, and extended Kevin O'Sullivan, the best baseball coach in the country. So some of that is a shame, but that's just the way that these people think. Now, I'll say this: a couple of these guys, if Florida goes and upsets Tennessee and Knoxville, these guys love the university. They're fans too. So all of a sudden they'll be like, I told you that Napier was fine. I told you things were, but we all saw what we saw Saturday.
That's the tough part, is that those optics were unbelievably bad. There's no spin zone whatsoever. And I
No,
target that Kentucky game. if they lose that Kentucky game, I think that's curtains. I think that's curtains on the Napier era. That would be the biggest gut punch ever to not be able to break to not beat Kentucky once for
Yeah.
Billy. Two of those games at home. I would view that as the target date.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, you know, the A&M game I don't think will break people in the way the Kentucky one will, but if they
Sure.
lost to A&M and Kentucky at home, it's worth noting that that would make Napier 5-7 in power conference games in the swamp. Steve Spurrier lost 5 games in the swamp ever.
Yeah.
So when
Times
I
have
wrote,
changed.
I think I wrote last week, Florida was almost invincible in that building for 12 years because they were almost invincible in that building. Um, yeah, I mean, you lose 7 home games in a 3-year period. That's one more than Ron Zook lost, and two more than Ron Zook lost in a 3-year period. Um, Zook is kind of considered the bottom of the barrel in terms of all the coaches that have come since Spurrier. And Napier obviously would then move to assuming he wins Saturday, would be 12-17 or 12-18, depending on what happens against Miss State and Starkville. Um, it's tough to survive 12-18 at anywhere, but especially in Florida.
Yeah. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch these next few weeks because there will be
Yeah.
a lot of tense moments that await. And because these conversations are happening, I feel okay to be able to ask this question. And I've already done this mentally. After a while, I did that probably, gosh, when did I do this? Somewhere in between like the third or fourth Cam Ward touchdown, probably the third Cam Ward touchdown. I was like, buddy, we need a list of candidates that I
Yeah.
came up with. So let me throw these at you, just kind of see your reaction. Which one of these is most intriguing for you? I think Glenn Schumann, as much as Florida fans don't want to admit, going into the Kirby tree would be like kind of a tail between the legs moment, would be fascinating. I think you watch what Danton Lane did for USC's defense against LSU. You're seeing that already play against SEC competition, where that's an overnight thing that it could be with somebody that, like Schumann, is 34 years old, is very much an up and comer in this business. Alex Golish is going to be a guy that's going to surface a lot with
Mm-hmm.
experience in the state of Florida, already built up a group of 5 program in USF, TBD on kind of how this year plays out for him. But you could go through and have the obvious names of a Lane Kiffin, of course, like that is always going to surface and that's always going to be popular. But which one of those, or maybe there's one off the board that kind of intrigues you?
Yeah. So Alex is one that intrigues me because I think that's a hard job. Um, and I don't think we typically think of Florida jobs in the state of Florida as being hard. But I think that one's pretty tough. Just because it's not like Miami where there's the rich storied history. So they're still trying to figure out, I guess they're going to have a stadium, which is great, but recruiting to come play in Raymond James where we share revenue and nobody's there. All of that is our facilities are way behind. I just think it's a very difficult place, and been super impressed with what they've done. Everybody knows how they played against Alabama last year, for example. The level of preparedness when you watch South Florida play is impressive to me, and I think obviously anything would be an upgrade in Florida after what we saw last Saturday in terms of preparedness. I I will say this, and I am of liberty to say that people that I've had these conversations with, of course, they've thought about, oh, I wonder if this person would be interested, and they did seem universally to suggest that taking a swing at a big name and breaking away from a little bit of the University of Florida's mold, which is always let's go find a young up and comer. We hit on Urban Meyer, we hit on Billy Donovan, we hit on Kevin O'Sullivan. They like to do that. They haven't traditionally gone for a splash hire, but I think Florida would make a run at Lane Kiffin. I do. I think Lane, the only job he wants more than the Florida job, I think, is the Alabama job. Um, so I think Lane would listen. Florida would win a bidding war with Ole Miss. There's my first piss off the listeners to the podcast take, but it's just the reality. Florida has more money, um, and it's a better job. So they would win that contest if that's who they wanted to hire. The drawbacks to Lane are obvious. He has one championship, one conference title in 15 years of coaching now, which he won at FAU. So, how great is Lane? Uh, what would Lane be a more user friendly version of Dan Mullen? Perhaps.
There's a take.
Would he be a more, I saw some Florida fans enjoying him trolling Florida State this week, and I thought, yeah, how much will they love that when he's 10-2 every year and loses in the first round of the playoff? At Florida, some people might be thrilled, but is there a championship ceiling with Kiffin? That's an interesting discussion, I think. I think Florida would probably call Dan Lanning and lose. There's a battle they would not win. But I do think that would be one. And then the other name I'd mention, you didn't mention, is Jed Fish, who it's hard to win 10 games at Arizona. I know Jacksonville Jaguars fans that are also Gators fans would probably have some PTSD, but Pete Carroll is the best example of a failed NFL experience. Maybe Nick Saban, depending on if you think he failed. But Jed Fish certainly wasn't a great offensive coordinator in the NFL, but won 10 games at Arizona, which is a very hard thing to do. They did that in a good Pac-12, by the way, last year. When he took that job, they were coming off a 2-10 year, and he played for Spurrier. So he's an alum of the university with ties to Florida. I think certainly would be somebody that they would contact and at least vet.
What about Lance Leipold or the wild card that I'm going to throw in there until I hear someone say something negative about him at Florida? But Brian Johnson, the former OC under Mullen, who, look,
Yeah.
I don't think that would be the first choice or anything like that, so don't get it twisted, but would be a very interesting wild card if he has that type of year to all of a sudden warrant that discussion. I don't know how tight his people are behind closed doors, but it's someone that had a really high approval rating.
Yeah, no, his approval rating was obviously extremely high, and even though, I mean, Jalen Hurts likes him, despite everything that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, Jalen would never say a bad thing about Brian Johnson. I think he'd be somebody they'd consider. I don't think, I haven't heard Lance Leipold. I don't know. I honestly couldn't say on that front, but I think. You've mentioned a couple of the names. I think dipping into the Kirby tree is an interesting thought process. I think Florida's frightened. I think what would frighten Florida there is that they've gone Saban tree 3 times and failed all 3 times. And so I think the closest that they came to success was Meyer tree. And so maybe Brian Johnson kind of checks that box. Another name is Urban Meyer. Which I think
Neil, what are we doing? Come on now.
Another name is Urban Meyer.
That is a name.
It is funny to hear like all the people the conspiracy theories there run deep with him just sitting in his house in Sarasota and doing every Florida talk show that he can possibly find his way onto. But the reason for that is that he wants on the Ring of Honor very bad.
Yeah.
It's not because he wants to be the head coach again.
Let's get Spurrier calling plays for him. How about that? Is that a good combination?
Yeah, I've heard that. Steve Spurrier, interim coach, is my favorite one.
Yeah, let's. You know what? I think Tebow's got like a COVID year that he could use or something like that. Can we get Tebow back to play quarterback? Is that the trio? Would that work?
Let's do it.
Neil, great conversation. Like I tell people all the time, Neil is very, very well connected at Florida. So trust me, like very plugged in. You should follow all of his work. That's great stuff for us. SaturdayDownSouth.com, covering the ACC as well as you rep the UNC sweatshirt, the Air Jordan sweatshirt. I love it. Neil, great stuff, man. We'll talk again real soon.
Thanks, Connor. Appreciate you.
All right, well, let's send everybody off into week 2 with some Lad of the Week. I'll start us off here. I realize this happened about a week ago. It's kind of more of like an early week 1 thing. But Travis Hunter, man, look, I don't care if you dislike Dion, if you dislike Shador, really, if you dislike everything about Colorado. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong or that you can't have that opinion, whatever. But if you can't appreciate Travis Hunter, I think that means you can't appreciate football because What this guy is doing is so ridiculous. And I know we talked about it when we did our draft of non-Heisman quarterbacks, non-quarterback Heismans. That's what I meant to say. But the snap count. Let me read this first. This man played 129 snaps in the season opener. Outside wide receiver, 52 snaps. Wide cornerback, 49 snaps. Slot cornerback, 11 snaps. Box, 11 snaps. Slot wide receiver, 5 snaps. Free safety, 1 snap. That alone, if you just told me a guy was out there and he had 2 catches and a pass deflection or something like that as a corner, if you just told me that he did that and made a tackle or 2 in space, I would probably still have him as lad of the week. But the fact that this guy is out here doing this at such a high level and doesn't look like he's breaking a sweat. Like he gets to the SVP interview, I watched that afterwards, and he doesn't look like he's just played an entire football game. It looks like he just went through a warm-up. You're not breathing heavy. You're not just sitting there getting hooked up to IVs. How are we need to study him. We need to study Travis Hunter to figure out how this human being exists, because it is so remarkable, his conditioning. And I don't know what's going to happen in the NFL or all these other things, but just for what he's doing at the college level, this stat is incredible from the Ringer's Austin Gale. Travis Hunter has now played 40 plus snaps on both sides of the ball 7 times. No other player at the college level has done that even once in the last decade. And this man's done it 7 times. It's incredible. The catch that he made in the end zone where he looked like he was falling down, he had to go kind of behind the DB who was hand fighting with him. I mean, 7 catches, 132 yards, 3 touchdowns in an opener. I hope we get a full season of Travis Hunter healthy. It's kind of weird to think we've only had 9 games of him at the FBS level. It feels like more, but because he got hurt last year, we just haven't had that much Travis Hunter. He's unbelievable. And look, he could probably win this award every single week, but he was a blast to be able to watch. I was like trying to watch as much of that game as possible. And like every 2 seconds, he would just do something. And football unicorn in every way.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts, man. I mean, to the point where I was talking about playing 2 sports. I think this is a little bit different. Good at the top of defense, same position or same sport, but like it's never been done before, to your point. And like we talked about in kind of that Heisman preview, he has no reason to do this. Like he just wants his team to win. He loves playing football. So that's like the apex football guy. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this. We see that the difference in talent between North Dakota State and Colorado is literally just Travis Hunter. And the plays he was able to make are why they won that game. And if he couldn't make those plays, they lose that game. It's very simple because he was playing the entire time.
Did you see the last play? They couldn't even stop the Hail Mary. And they could. North Dakota State completes this Hail Mary, and they're still like 10 yards short of the goal line. Yeah. And Travis Hunter is so pissed. And he's like, just knock it down. Travis Hunter is like having to coach his teammates on basic football 101 things while he's on the last play of 100. That's his 129th snap. And he's having to coach up the team on the field. Get Travis Hunter some help, man. This guy deserves it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, hey, Cal-Auburn couldn't even get him involved. So there you go.
Oh, God. There we go. Loggins, I will not defend Dowell Loggins as a schemer. I will defend him as a quarterback developer, not as a schemer. We will not do that.
We'll take that. But yeah, that's super duper cool. I cannot wait to watch Travis Hunter for the rest of the year. I think that alone is going to make this game. I mean, if you just watch the Travis Hunter show on defense, that's going to be the best entertainment, because don't watch any other part of their defense. I'll do mine kind of quickly. This one, I mean, when was the last time we were this excited about a vanity player? Maybe you could argue Ray Davis, but the way that Diego Pavia burst onto the scene for SEC fans who are not, New Mexico State stands, and the way that you had that dialed in. I mean, these guys, we were even making jokes about it. And shout out to John, who inexplicably picked Vandy in this game when we were in Vegas, and was just writing that out. It was so funny.
Did he go Vandy money line or Vandy spread with like the 13, whatever the spread?
It was one of the. I was like, "Are you serious?" He's like, "Yeah, dude. I don't know. They're an SEC team." I was like, "Buddy, maybe they are today."
My guy Barry, same thing. It was like plus 450 or something like that.
Yeah. And like, I mean, hey, good for them. And also, it wasn't a fake win. Like, it wasn't that VT came out kind of like sluggish or whatever. Like, they came back and Vandy beat them at their comeback, like while they were hot too. So that's really impressive. Yeah, I think Diego Pavia is the exact kind of crazy that I respect, and the kind of crazy that I think that I am, which is a guy that would pretty much bite his ankle off to win, and he's just got that literal dog in him. And it's they kind of go into this on the latest like shutdown fullcast about gonna like steal their reporting or whatever. But his family's super interesting. He's just a very interesting guy, and so yeah, I think that this definitely changes the trajectory of the Vanderbilt football team, because this is a team that we're looking at. I mean, they've already not won a game. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's on the table for them. So looking at last year and how it was such a big step back from, the year they beat Florida, and the year 2 SEC wins. And it's like, where are they going to go from here? We said this feels like such an unwinnable job. Well, you need a guy who's just that level of insane. He reminds me of Peyton a little bit too, where it's like, no one's ever going to tell you can't win this game. You're not going to listen to them. The way that he puts his body on the line, the way that he has these like crazy option concepts where he's extending these handoffs, I think is so sick. I mean, it just makes Vandy into a fun team to watch that has pride in the logo, which has been, since, I mean, at least the Mason era.
We're going to try to get him on the show.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try and get him on next week. We'll see. I'm sure he's had a lot of requests coming in, but we will try and make that happen, because sometimes when you know you're not going to be competing for these things, you just want to be fun. Diego Pavia is going to be fun.
Oh yeah,
as long as he can stay healthy, stay in one piece. Don't think they want to be running him as much as they did, but to win a game like that, obviously, that meant so much to that program. So yeah,
I'll say really quick too. One thing about Vandy that we've always said is just don't roll over and die. Like, show some pride. Vandy has been such an easy out, outside of the 1 year with Kentucky and Florida, but whatever. So like, they've been such an easy out for most of these games. We go maybe. No, with this guy, it doesn't matter if you're down 28 points against Alabama. He's going to take the field and try to win that game, and that's what Vandy has lacked for so long.
Just saying, 2-0 in his last 2 against SEC competition. Oh wait, no, that's not true. 2-0 in his last 2 against Core 4 Power 5 competition.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Totally, you get it. All right, week 2. It's going to be awesome. Very much looking forward to this weekend. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Started Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ Guerra, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.